Most Worshipful Grand Master of Indiana, Right Worshipful Grand Officers and members of the Right Worshipful Grand Lodge of Indiana, I greet you well and wish you every success in your current initiative to bring Freemasonry to the masses by means of Skype and the Internet. You're the current representatives of an organisation that can trace its roots back to the period 1795, when Freemasonry was first represented in the Indiana Territory only by members of the various military lodges active at that time. The Grand Lodge of Kentucky issued the first formal warrant to hold a lodge, number 15, in the town of Vincennes in the Territory in the year 1808. It would be a further 10 years before the Grand Lodge of Indiana was formally constituted. And from those early beginnings, your predecessors and you have continued to develop and enlarge the influence of Freemasonry on the world at large. We members of the Right Worshipful, the Grand Lodge of Ireland, send you Sid Mil Fáilte and thank you for this opportunity to bring you good tidings from the land of the Solstice Square. In our land, the arts of stonemasonry are long established, tracing their roots back approximately 5,300 years to the magnificent Sun Temple complex at Newgrange, probably the earliest surviving stone-built structure in the world. This is a building that was in existence for 500 years before the Stonehenge Monument and 1,000 years before the pyramids came into existence in Egypt. Mythologically, our story today starts in the mists of time, in a period when the Red Branch Knights ruled Ulster, and amongst their number is the mighty figure of Cahill, a legendary warrior known as the Hound of Ulster. As some of you know, Cahill was based at Dundalgan, one of the old Irish names for Dundalk, and his entire tale is written around that part of North Louth. At the turn of last century, Lady Augustus Gregory, in conjunction with and at the inspiration of W.B. Yeats, completed a translation and study of Cahill, which was published in 1902 as Cahill of Murderman. The entire Cahill story is full of astronomical and masonic references, too many to record at this time. Most importantly, the death of Cahill is exactly similar to the death of Hiram, when it took 3 attempts to finally kill him. He too was quickly buried before finally being disinterred and his remains being returned for proper burial at Emannacha, better known to us all today as Navan Fort, located outside the city of Armagh. And as for his killers, they fled southwards and were quickly caught and dispatched with the rude justice of the day. As an active member of the Irish Constitution in Ireland, it's my intention today to brief you all on the factual origins and development of Irish Freemasonry over the past 285 years, and highlight the many contributions that Irish Freemasonry have given, not only to the other 2 home constitutions, but to Freemasonry wheresoever dispersed over the face of the globe. I'm always amazed as I attend the various Masonic symposia or read the latest Masonic research that without exception, modern Masonic researchers rarely consider Ireland's claim to a proud Masonic past. The Irish are usually considered to be troublesome, rebellious, and of course mouthy, and I'm sure I've managed to live up to those particular labels of honour. What is rarely acknowledged is the important role that the Irish Constitution, in conjunction with the Scottish, played in maintaining regularity. For example, when our brethren in the Grand Lodge of Westminster strayed off the path at the time of Pritchard's infamous exposures in the 1730s. However, I shall be coming back to these thoughts shortly. I know that all of you will be familiar with the many surviving early links which tantalisingly tell us that our order has descended from the purely operative lodges found throughout Scotland, or indeed that Freemasonry originated in London with the 4 old lodges which met in the Goose and Gridiron. I of course hold a different view in that I see many early references in the oral traditions of Ireland, where we too have our old council monument books from cities such as Dublin, Cork, Kilkenny, and surviving records of our operative guilds from Kilkenny and Limerick. Much is made of the fact that no old English language rolls or manuscripts survive in Ireland, yet we have a tradition of masonry dating back before the Druids. Our land is covered with a plethora of round towers, beehive huts, church buildings, ring forts, and other more esoteric examples of the stone master's craft. current Irish language researchers such as Bob Bashford, the Adoptean Irish, are looking into the existence of a unique secret language used by the stonemasons of Ireland using words and phrases which derive from Hebrew, Phoenician and Ancient Irish. Could it be that our long-sought-for Irish constitution rolls will be found among the rich store of early Irish manuscripts meticulously been investigated by the Irish Language Commission in Dublin? Suffice to say, at this point, that the known roots of the Masons' tongue from Hebrew, Phoenician and Ancient Irish fits well with the long-held beliefs of some of our better-informed Irish brethren on the kernel of truth hidden amongst the many tales about the existence and travels of the Tithadadana, that magical tribe which played such a prominent role in the mythology and spirituality of the Irish people. The origins of Freemasonry remain in obscurity, despite the many theories being put forward on a regular basis by researchers around the globe. One interesting new thesis researched and published in Ireland by Worshipful Brother Chris McClintock is explained in great detail in his new book entitled The Craft and the Cross. And this book takes a radical and refreshing look at our history. His conclusions are certainly thought-provoking and will eventually have to be considered by other Masonic researchers as these theories continue to advance and evolve. Some definite points that we can note are the many similarities between Freemasonry and the famous Elysian mysteries, and indeed the essence of Jerusalem. In the latter fraternity, the obligation of secrecy was most solemnly imposed upon the candidate. Admission was denied to females. The Essens used distinctive signs and tokens of recognition, and during the formal rites of admission into their mysteries, the candidate was invariably clad in white, as being emblematic of innocence and purity. And of course, Brother William Laurie in the 1850s was of the view that the Essens were descendants of the Cassadeans, an ancient association of architects connected to the building of King Solomon's Temple. You may well be interested to learn that similar requirements were imposed on candidates in Ireland, wishing to be trained as future Druids, and also by the Irish Chaldee Church, throughout its many monasteries located across Ireland, where future missionaries were trained before being dispatched to Iona, Northumberland, Scotland, and of course the rest of Europe. So even back in those early days, the monks from Scotia Major, as Ireland was then known, travelled the length and breadth of the known world. However, of particular interest to me is the fact that in Ireland, church history suggests that many of the Druids had no difficulty in adopting the new faith of the Chaldees, and indeed many from a Druidical background converted and enthusiastically adopted the new faith, which apparently lay so close to their original beliefs. Staying on the Masonic theme, we find many references in AQC and elsewhere to the links with the Masonic College of Artificers, who in turn were attached to the various Roman legions, and in this way building skills were said to have been brought to England and Scotland. We in Ireland never bent the knee to the Romans, and our tradition of building in stone predate the arrival of the Romans in England by thousands of years. However, if we follow the collegiate trail, we eventually arrive at York in the year 926 AD, when King Athelstan's son, Prince Edward, held a General Assembly of Masons at York, wherein the great traditions of symbolic and operative masonry were constituted, revived or organised, and a new code of laws for the government of the craft was instituted. Sadly, records of these events, including the original charter, were kept in the archives of the Old Lodge at York and were destroyed during the War of the Roses. Scotland, of course, developed similar but different general assemblies under the auspices of the Earls of St Clair of Rosslyn, who reputedly acted a supervisory role over Scottish operative masons, adjudicating on any trade disputes that might arise. Now, sadly, we in Ireland currently have no surviving English language records of general assemblies built at Earls, or indeed the guiding hand of kings or princes. We do, however, find early records in the town books of Dublin, Kilkenny, Galway and Cork, and one of our earliest surviving Masonic artefacts, the Ballsbridge Square, was recorded in the year 1830 from the foundations of the Ballsbridge, northern land pier on the King's Island or English town side of the River Shannon at Limerick. This fascinating old artefact, bearing the date 1507, and also bears the following inscription: "I will strive to live with love and care upon the level by the square. Certainly suggested to the brotherhood of today. And on a similar vein, in the year 1921, our brethren in EQC recorded the discovery of a bog oak medallion located in the ruins of an old cottage just outside the village of Dermot in County Tyrone. This discovery appears to have been very well documented at the time, with formal statements from a number of local brethren from Shrullick, Lisnahanna, Enniskillen, and of course the Deputy Provincial Grand Master of Tyrone and Fermanagh. This medallion purported to have been dated from 1517 and bears in both faces a plethora of Masonic symbols, including the usual symbols of mortality. And again, brethren, more interesting material can mull over in our minds. In Trinity College, Dublin, records still survive of a 1688 student's treatise, a harangue prepared in Latin by one of the candidate bachelors, which pokes fun at university life at the time. Of particular interest to us are the references to the order of Freemasonry and speculative membership, and the fact that at that time there appears to have been two varieties available, the old and the new way. This may well be a reference to the evolution from operative to speculative masonry, or indeed may even refer to the ongoing political scene at the time, leading up to the Glorious Revolution. Either way, it's an important affirmation of the long establishment of Freemasonry in one of our oldest Irish universities, as quite clearly it would be pointless to poke fun at an organisation that no one else had ever heard of. One area that is indisputable is the existence of a developed 3-degree system in Ireland around the year 1711. Documentary proof was found in the collection of Trinity College, Dublin, and was subjected to detailed inspection by the brethren of AQC in the early part of the 20th century. Here one will find many matters that are only appeared in English and Scottish ritual at a considerably later date. Newt Jones and Hammer, in their seminal work, The Early Masonic Catechisms, published in 1943, give a complete copy of this short catechism at pages 63-64 of their work. And again, this catechism had been previously published in its entirety in the Transactions of the Irish Lodge Research for the year 1924. Whilst it's the question of constitutional rules, it's worth noting that the esteemed Dr. Anderson, in the preface to the 1723 Laws and Constitution, makes claim to the fact that he used some of the old Irish records in the preparation of his new book. Now, as many of you know, Dr. Anderson's claims have not always been borne out by subsequent facts. However, it's of great interest that he would feel the need to mention Ireland as an early source of Masonic regularity, if in fact Freemasonry was not already well known in Ireland at that time. Now, Ireland has always been credited with the introduction of warrants, the properly constituted written authority of a Grand Lodge issued to a group of brethren, permitting them to assemble as a lodge and conduct the business of a lodge. Strictly speaking, this isn't quite true, as we know that Mother Lodge No. 0 Kilwinning was in the habit of issuing some form of charter to its daughter lodges in the latter half of the 17th century, authorising them to assemble and meet as duly constituted bodies. However, Kilwinning didn't issue any laws or constitutions or provide any of the other support functions of a Grand Lodge. And it then fell to the Grand Lodge of Ireland to formalise the requirement for warrants and enforce the use of same throughout its area of control. Warrants were usually of two set types, being either stationary, issued to a specific town or village, or travelling, attached to an army or other military body. And it was from this starting point in 1731 that the Grand Lodge of Ireland spearheaded the spread of Freemasonry throughout the known world. Now, in 1730, John Pennell, Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Ireland, published his laws and constitutions. And interestingly, these follow Anderson's 1723 edition in many ways, but in some other quite particular issues, they differ very substantively and reflect the actual masonry worked in Ireland at that time. Irish Freemasonry was then largely Roman Catholic, and our charges reflect that point. The prayer said at the making of a brother, omitted by Anderson, is found at page 52 in Pennell's work. And in 1723 it is clear that the grade of fellowcraft is the highest craft degree then in use in London. And for example, in Anderson we note, under Charge 4, no brother can be a warden till he has passed the part of fellowcraft. Or going to General Regulation 13, the Treasurer and Secretary shall each have a clerk, who must be a brother in fellowcraft. And going on, in the absence of the Grand Wardens and the Grand Masters shall order private wardens to act as Grand Wardens pro tempore, whose places are to be provided by 2 fellowcrafts of the same lodge called forth to act. Now let's look briefly at Pennell, and his 4th charge of being a brother, and a fellowcraft, and in due time a master, and when qualified he may arrive to the honour of being a warden and then master of his lodge. Now, as we noted previously, Anderson only refers to a brother and fellowcraft, so it would appear that the 3rd degree noted in the Trinity College manuscript of 1711 was by 1730 recognised by the Grand Lodge of Ireland and in general use by the Brethren at large. Now I would like to take a few moments to reflect on the early records of the issue of warrants by the Grand Lodge of Ireland. In 1732, warrant number 11 was issued to the 1st Battalion Royal Scots, beginning our link with this regiment, which would continue until the year 1847. In the same year, warrant number 12 was issued to Major General Dalzie's Regiment of Foot, which later became the 33rd Foot. And 1 year later, in 1733, warrant 23 was issued to Colonel Hamilton's Regiment, which later came to glory as the 27th Foot Royal Enniskillen Dragoons. Then in 1734, warrant 33 was issued to the 21st Foot, better known today as the Royal Scots Fusiliers. And by this means, the leading edge of Irish masonry travelled in the van of the British Army, as it ensured the safety of England and her many colonies throughout the world. We in Ireland still have a proud boast today, in that the sun never sets at Irish Freemasonry. We have active lodges in places as diverse as the Caribbean, Gibraltar, Nigeria, South Africa, Hong Kong, India, Singapore, Australia and New Zealand. And in the past we have had outposts in Europe, the Americas, Africa and Australasia. Now brethren, I can see that some of you are ready to say, so what? All of the home constitutions have travelled throughout the world. My point is merely this, that thanks to the introduction of written warrants, we in Ireland led the way to the introduction of a formal structure by which the art of Freemasonry could successfully be spread worldwide on the backs of our military brethren, who were able to point the local populace in the right direction to acquire regularity by applying to the Grand Lodge of Ireland for their own local warrants. And we shouldn't forget the Irish diaspora, who for political, religious and economic reasons spread throughout the world. These brethren too took their beloved craft with them, and on arrival in their new homelands would band together with their new neighbours and begin the work afresh. Now such a case has recently come to light, buried in the midst of an old Czech manuscript, auctioned in New York in 2004. This document, known as the Radomski manuscript, contains the details and Masonic coats of arms of 87 members of the Radomski prefecture, which met in the city of Prague in the 1780s. This lodge operated under the strict observance rite and had no less than 8 Irish Masons amongst its members, with details of some 11 other occasional Irish visitors from Vienna. Thanks to the kindness of Right Worshipful Brother Jap Sadalak, the then Deputy Grand Master of the National Grand Lodge of Czechoslovakia, I enjoyed a visit to Prague to examine this document and subsequently was able to shed some light on the family histories of the Irish brethren named therein. However, this story is by no means unique, for it was a group of Irish Masons residing and working in London in 1751 who banded together and formed that famous English Grand Lodge which came to be known as the Ancients. For many years, the considered wisdom was that this body, known as the Ancients, broke away from the Grand Lodge of England in a schism over the ritual changes implemented by that body in response to the publication of a number of Masonic exposures. Brother Henry Sadler, past Grand Librarian of the United Grand Lodge of England, finally dismissed that theory when in the year 1887 he discovered the minute books belonging to the ancient Grand Lodge, and published a summary of the same in his excellent work, Masonic Facts and Fiction. However, it was thanks to the writings and actions of one man, the Irish immigrant Laurence Dermot, that we still pay great regard to the ancients today. Dermot laboured in troubled times and was a staunch supporter of Masonic discipline. He was often attacked and vilified by his enemies, but thankfully he was himself a fighter and an administrator extraordinaire. It's thanks to him that in so many ways English Masonry has developed as it has, and his mark can still be seen today. One simple example of this influence was in his introduction on the 14th of September 1752 of the resolution which directly led to the issue of warrants by an English Grand Lodge. He was the man who, in the back of his experiences in Dublin, introduced the legislation which led to the formation of a Grand Master's Lodge under the Ancients in line with Irish working. When the Grand Committee of the Ancients met to consider the question of bylaws, it was Dermot who produced a copy of the bylaws of his mother lodge, number 26 in Dublin, which were found by all present to be correct and were thus adopted by the Grand Lodge of the Ancients. He was a great promoter of the Royal Arch degree, which he brought over from Ireland, and it was the introduction of this degree which would prove to be such a great point of dissension for many years with the moderns. Dermot spent some time in the drafting, editing, printing and publishing of his opus, Imi Reason, which came to be the Book of Constitutions of the Grand Lodge of the Ancients. Now, one cannot overstress the importance of this work, which ran to several revisions and was adopted and used by nascent Grand Lodges throughout the world. But surely his greatest gift was his oft-stated wish that he might live to see a general conformity and universal unity between Masons of all denominations. Sadly, this wish was not to be fulfilled, and Dermot passed to the Grand Lodge above on June 1791. However, when the Articles of Union were finally signed in Kensington Palace on the 25th of November 1813, it was Dermot's legacy which won the day, providing the form and administration which would serve the United Grand Lodge of England so well in the years ahead. I would just like to spend a couple of moments now and consider matters of ritual and custom in subordinate Irish lodges. Our original ritual as practiced in Ireland may once have been shorter and simpler than we know it today, but by the year 1760 at the very latest, it had assumed the form still performed in our lodges to this day. There's no other constitution in the world possessing such a venerable rite, or one so uniformly accepted by its subordinate lodges. Now, another point worth noting is that the chair degree with its esoteric ceremony has been worked in Ireland from time immemorial. It was reintroduced into England by the Grand Lodge of the Ancients in 1751, having previously been discarded by the moderns about 1739. In Ireland, it was established custom that Irish lodges install their master twice a year on the two St. John's Day, on the 24th of June and 27th of December. It was not until the year 1875 that this rule finally changed, and now we only elect our lodge master once a year. This fixed period of election in Ireland, installing the new master on the next meeting after St. John's Day each year, is at variance with both Scottish and English practice of electing and installing their lodge officers as and when the lodge wishes. In Ireland, the lodge officers are elected on the votes of the Master Masons, members of the lodge, whereas in England, the usual form is that all except the lodge treasurer are appointed by the master. And next I would mention the lodge deacons, an integral part of Irish Masonry from its earliest times, and again only introduced into England by Dermot via the Grand Lodge of the Ancients. Now finally, I would draw your attention to the charge to the candidate, given after the ceremony of initiation, which in one form or another is given in nearly every Masonic constitution around the world. This charge is of Irish origin, having been initially presented to the world in Smith's Puppet Companion, published in Dublin in 1735. This work had the approbation of the Grand Master Kingsman, his deputy Brennan, and Grand Wardens, and was sold to the brethren under the banner, approved of and recommended by the Grand Lodge. If an Irish Mason today was to visit his mother lodge at Labour in the first half of the 18th century, He has no difficulty in proving his right to be there, to the satisfaction of brethren like Pennell, Griffith, or Smith. Yet he had observed certain customs that might seem strange to modern eyes. You would probably find the brethren seated at a long table with the master at the top, wrapped in a scarlet cloak, and wearing his hat. Bottles and glasses might seem to be too prominently displayed. The junior warden might appear as a person who didn't know his place, and the apron would probably be too large and very roughly made. It would become apparent to our modern visitor that Jews were collected from every brother present on the night of the meeting, and these meetings took place twice a month. Every 3 months an additional quarterly meeting would be held, which could only be attended by those brethren who were past the chair, or who had served as master of the lodge. Strangely enough, if a brother failed to attend after being duly summoned, he would be fined, and if he failed to pay the fine, he would be subjected to suspension or even expulsion. In one famous case in Mid-Antrim in the year 1809, a brother was expelled from the order for a period of 999 years for crimes against his brother. This sentence was then published in the local newspaper of the day. We previously made reference to the Royal Arch Masonry, and at this point I would like to draw your attention to its earliest history in Ireland. We first find mention of the Arch in Pennell's 1730 volume of Constitutions, and here we find the well-known phrase, "And let the cement of the brotherhood be so well preserved that the whole body remain as a well-built arch." This statement has to be considered in conjunction with the frontispiece used by Pennell, and indeed by Anderson, which shows the Grand Master standing beneath an arch, and the vista of columns supporting the Masonic edifice terminates in a well-built arch, ornamented with an unmistakable keystone. It was Pennell who also exhorted his brethren to quit themselves like men, walk by the line, stand by the plumb, live upon the square, and level their friendship to the end of time, and that while here they build to themselves and dwell in earthly tabernacles, they will make sure of an everlasting habitation not made with hands. Now it's my view that this choice of wording and associate symbolism was quite deliberate in the case of Pennell, and that he was laying out a clear roadmap for those in the know, pointing them to the goal of a well-built arch. The late worshipful brother Philip Crossley had written extensively on the Royal Arch degree, and it was his contention that Irish Masonic working always contained an element of what we now call Royal Arch ritual. In its earliest form, it was worked in Ireland as the master's part, allowing the master an opportunity to recover that which was lost. However, by the time that we find further references to excellent masons carrying the Royal Arch, and a newspaper report from Youghal in 1743, matters had clearly progressed to a position where the Royal Arch workings were then a totally separate degree. The following year, 1744, Dr. Fifield de Seigney published his serious and impartial inquiry, in which he clearly states that the brethren have no right to the benefits of Royal Arch Masonry until such times as they are duly qualified, having passed the chair, and make application in the proper form. And only then are they entitled to progress further towards the rank of excellent masons. I hope that in the foregoing remarks you fully understand my contention that the Royal Arch, unlike any other so-called higher degree, was in fact an integral part of craft masonry from the earliest times. Its current position in Ireland evolved from this intimate relationship with the craft, and in part explains why the historical part of our Irish ritual is different from that worked in England and Scotland. Now, brethren, some aspects of Irish masonry are unique to the Irish Constitution. Thanks to the work of Augustus Frederick, 3rd Duke of Leinster, and his faithful Grand Secretary John Fowler, the Irish Constitution now have a body called the Grand Council of Rights for Ireland, which has overall control of the recognition of Masonic rights under the Irish Constitution. Now, this is a very tightly controlled body, which to date has only recognised the following 5 rights: the Grand Lodge of Ireland, the Supreme Grand Royal Arch Chapter of Ireland, the Grand Council of Knight Masons, Great Priory of Ireland, and the Supreme Council of 33rd Degree, Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite. Within each of these groupings, ritual is controlled by bodies known as the Grand Council or Grand Chapter of Instruction, which have overall control of the ritual within their particular rite. These instructional bodies comprise of elected members from brethren skilled in rituals throughout the Irish Constitution, and nominated representatives from both Grand Lodge and Provincial Grand Lodges, whose duties was to keep these bodies appraised of all current decisions and rulings in respective Irish workings. For some 300 years, Irish workings were a completely oral tradition with no printed ritual. It's only been in the last few years that this tradition changed, and Grand Lodges approved the Grand Lodge Instruction finally issued printed ritual workings, and in this way, up until modern times, Irish ritual has been kept vibrant and alive. And this is done by a constant process of checks and balances imposed by the Grand Lodge Instruction. Indeed, the pinnacle of many Masonic careers, after years of ritual work, including the preparation and degree exemplifications in front of the Grand Lodge Instruction, is the invitation to become an elected member of this body, entitled to participate in both open and closed sessions. This particular body is so well suited to the Irish temperament, where there's a great love of language, debate, and the old oral traditions of the Irish bards and storytellers. In this way, the complex rituals of the Irish craft survived, and indeed thrived, from the earliest of times. The Irish love of conviviality, fellowship, and companionship was one of the main driving forces in the spread and development of the Irish craft throughout the world. Sadly, few records survive that can tell us much about the early spread of Freemasonry, but we can say with certainty that written proof survives, showing that lodges existed in both Dublin and Munster in the period 1725-1726. By the year 1731, Lord Kingston, Grand Master of Ireland, used the local newspapers and appealed to the lodges, congregated in several cities and towns in this kingdom, that's the Kingdom of Ireland, without a warrant to take out regular warrants. Now, the lodges must have been many and scattered, otherwise it wouldn't have been worthwhile to publish such an appeal generally in the press of the day. By 1797, there was scarcely a village in Ireland without its Masonic lodge. You may be interested to learn the official Grand Lodge records for the year 1805 show that in England, Scotland and Ireland, the make-up of lodges in each constitution were as follows. In England, under the moderns, we had 355 lodges in the British Isles, and we had 196 lodges abroad, making the total for the Grand Lodge and moderns 551 lodges. In England, under the ancients, we had a total of 258 lodges in the year 1805, and under the Grand Lodge of Scotland, we had a total of 284 lodges, giving you a total for England and Scotland of 1,093 warranted lodges. Whereas in Ireland, at the same time, there were 815 regular lodges in existence. Now, clearly one can see that in Ireland, Freemasonry is very deep-rooted, an integral part of the activities of the kilt, and clearly not some newfangled development brought in by English and Scottish settlers. This fact would become even clearer in the 1840s, when the papal bull against Freemasonry was finally enforced by Archbishop Troy in Dublin, and nearly led to the decimation of the order in Ireland. Indeed, it was to be many years before this great loss of membership was to be overcome, only as a result of the surge in lodge members after the end of the First World War, when many new pals lodges were formed. Now, what may not be so widely known is the fact that the Grand Lodge of Ireland has in the past issued a number of warrants here on the mainland of England. In 1745, Irish Warrant 148 was issued to a number of the brethren to hold a lodge in Norwich. This lodge remained in contact with the Grand Lodge of Ireland right up to the year 1813. Warrant 247 was issued to a number of Irish brethren in the Middle Temple in London in 1754. And similarly in Scotland, Warrant 252 was issued to a number of brethren in Paisley in 1754. Both of these warrants kept working up until the period 1810-1813. And finally, at Dunse in Scotland, Warrant 520 was issued in the year 1809. Now, this, of course, is to say nothing of the warrants, 3 in number, that were issued to the Channel Islands, and 5 in number issued throughout the Isles of Man. Having now made many claims to the strength, perseverance, and impact of Irish Masonry, it would be very remiss of me not to credit the first written pamphlet on the subject of the old constitutions belonging to the ancient and honourable society of free and accepted Masons. Now, this rare old pamphlet was published in London in 1722 during the Grand Mastership of the Duke of Montagu, and purports to be a copy of those old regulations read by the Duke to the assembled brethren on St John's Day 1721, immediately after his lordship's installation. The introductory text goes something like this: "Good brethren and fellows, our purpose is to tell you how and in what manner the craft of masonry was begun, and afterwards how it was founded by worthy kings and princes, and other wise men, hurtful to none, and also to them that be true. We will declare what doth belong to every Freemason, to keep firm good faith, if you take heed thereunto, it is well worthy to be kept, which is contained in the 7 liberal sciences. Now, brethren, I haven't brought you news of kings or princes, but hope that you now have a better understanding of the role played by Irish Masons in the spread and development of Freemasonry throughout the globe. Irish Masonry is where it is today, thanks to the curiosity, determination, erudition, and enthusiasm of its brethren throughout the ages. At this point, I would record the great debt that I owe to many of my Masonic forebears who have trod this way before. Masonic giants such as the first Earl of Ross, John Pennell, Lord Kingston, Fifield de Seigneur, the Donoughmore family, who between them have been in charge of Irish Freemasonry for a quarter of our recorded history, governing the craft in Ireland for some 76 years in total. Laurence Dermot, who single-handedly returned English Freemasonry to regularity in the mid-18th century. Chetwood Crawley, our first authentic Masonic researcher. Philip Croswell and John Heron Lever, authors of Volume 1 of the History of the Grand Lodge of Ireland. And of course, last but by no means least, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Walker, MA, past Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Ireland, whose role and importance in the upper echelons of world Freemasonry have been acknowledged by both Ugly and the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Now, I thank you for the attention that you've paid to my remarks, most of which have been extracted from the detailed researches of the brethren named above. It's been an honour indeed to participate in this most novel event, which uses technology so beneficially to bring us all together in this shared space on the internet. I hope you'll have all been able to understand my Ulster Scots accent and have enjoyed the paper and its contents, and I can but hope that you will find some small nugget of knowledge buried therein. Thank you very much. Welcome, brethren, here to our Provincial Grand Lodge Museum down in the basement in Rosemary Street. The very first thing you see here is an old Masonic jug from Malone Lodge 418, and is a particularly interesting item for us in Belfast as it's manufactured using Belfast clay. It is one of only 3 in existence, the other 2 are in other private hands. As we go around the lodge room, you'll see a mixture of Masonic artefacts collected over the last 100 years, representative of Freemasonry throughout Ireland, and not only just limited to the province of Antrim or the city of Belfast. One of the most interesting things we have in the collection is the American Masonic Party, a celebration by our American brethren serving in the forces during the Second World War, who laid on a dinner for the Irish Masonic brethren, and thanks for the welcome they got in the lodge rooms throughout the length and breadth of Northern Ireland. This is one of 2 such commemorative posters which were prepared at the time by our American friends, and the other one is currently to be found in the lower basements of the White House as part and parcel of the Second World War museum collection. We have some very unusual and early Royal Arch chapter jewels, both officer jewels and individual member jewels. And probably the most interesting Royal Arch items we have are the 3 crowns for the 3 principal officers, the excellent King, High Priest and Chief Scribe. These are a very old set, prepared in tin, and are worn occasionally on formal occasions. We in Belfast for many years had strong links with France with the wine trade, and one of the benefits of that was the receipt of painted silk aprons from France, and this is a particularly fine example here, all the way across from Nimes in central France. Along the back wall we have a memorial of various members of our order who served in the First World War and unfortunately didn't make it homewards. And also along the back wall we have a very unusual hand embroidered Masonic apron, quite a large apron dating from the 18th century with a plethora of Masonic symbols illustrated thereon. On the table in front of the apron we have various collectors' jewels, founders' jewels, and some of our old malls. And at the very end we have one very interesting piece which came to us all the way from Ceylon, and it's a display of Masonic symbols formed out of various beetles and other insect life which was found in the wilds of Ceylon. Here we have a few examples of some of the jewels in our collection, and I would particularly draw your attention to the Grand Lodge of Instruction jewels, which are a uniquely Irish development. The Grand Lodge of Instruction is a body which has control of all of our ritual over the years, and is an aspiration for many brethren to become elected members thereof. Another area of great interest is the Irish Lodge of Research, and unlike most constitutions, Ireland only has one research lodge that centralises and deals with all our research into Masonic matters. And here we have a few examples of the jewels used by that body in years past. Of particular interest is the Thomas Harper jewel, which is a very early English example of the development of Royal Arch symbols. As you can see, we have the arch, we have the altar, and we have the light coming down from above. It's an unusual example and gives you one idea of the thinking and development in Royal Arch symbolism. We also are quite fortunate in Antrim in having a good collection of books, including the Amy Raisin, our old friend Laurence Dermot, and working on through copies of early works in the Grand East of Ulster, the Society of Mops, an early Dutch derivative of Freemasonry, and a fascinating volume on the Temple of Solomon, the Orbis Miraculum, which is the portrait by Scripture Light, and then our most fascinating piece, which is the works of Erasmus from 1548, probably the earliest printed book in our collection.
Come